Hello, everyone. I'd like to do a quick lesson on finding evidence in books. Sometimes we're asked particular questions about characters and we're asked to kind of prove it, or how do you know? That, that in those instances, we need to kind of look in the words and the pictures of the books to come up with some answers. And I'm going to try to do a little lesson on how to do that, all right? So I am going to share this screen here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. All right. So we're finding evidence in books, and we're looking in the words and the pictures of the book to figure out how some characteristics of characters in the book or some feelings of characters in the books. And I want to start off with some places to look. We look in the words. So the authors use the words to tell a story. So when we're reading the words, we're kind of looking at the words and thinking about what's going on in the story, right? Illustrators are going to use the pictures to tell, or, they're going to add details to the story, all right? And they both work on or help out with being able for us as readers to be able to figure out some characters' feelings or some characteristics, all right? And they describe what characters do. They show us, or they describe what characters say or think or even look like, all right? And we take in that information and we can figure out some of the characteristics of characters or some feelings of characters, all right? I'm gonna take a few pages from the book, Nobody Hugs a Cactus. If you haven't read the book, I strongly suggest you do so before you look at this lesson, or you can go on my YouTube site and listen to me read it to you. It is a great story if you haven't heard it yet. All right. In the story, Hank goes through some changes. All right. In the beginning of the story, Hank felt angry, and in the middle, he felt kind of sad, and at the end, he felt very happy. All right. There are some definite changes that are going on in Hank. We could also talk about Hank's attitude towards a hug throughout this, but they kind of go together. All right. Sometimes teachers will ask you, or in a book discussion, questions come up. One of the questions may be, how do you know Hank felt angry? All right. We got to look for the evidence in the book that tells us that Hank is angry. Right? We may be able to read the book and see the pictures, and it may be really easy that we can see that. But now we got to turn that. We need to be able to talk about it. All right. That's what we're trying to do here today. How did the author let you know that he was sad? Well, there's this word author here that tells you that you need to look in the words to find the evidence that lets you know that Hank was sad. Okay. Another question that may come up in a book discussion, or a teacher may ask you, what did the illustrator do to show you he was happy, right? So if that clue word is, that key word there is illustrator, that means you're looking in the pictures for that evidence that lets you know that a character is happy, sad, or you'll be able to look and describe some characteristics of a character. So one of the pages in the beginning of the book, I'm going to use this page as an example. Let's take a look first at what the author has to say on this page. The author, Hank was, he says, their words are, Hank was still yelling at the tortoise when a jackrabbit dashed by. Hiya, Prickles, she shouted. My name isn't Prickles, Hank yelled back. And stay out of my yard. All right. So how do we know how Hank is feeling here? Well, let's look at some of these words that the author chose, all right? First off, Hank was still yelling at the tortoise, yelling, right? And he also yelled back at the jackrabbit. So he's yelling. Well, when you're yelling, you're usually angry, right? So we can say, we can cite this evidence, and we could say, we know Hank was angry because he yelled at the tortoise and the jackrabbit. And he also said, and stay out of my yard, right? When angry people say that, like, if somebody was to walk in my yard, I might say, stay out of my yard. Not really, but at any rate. So let's see what the illustrator did here. And again, the illustrator uses pictures to add to the story. So what did the illustrator do here? And in this case, it's the same person by Carter Goodrich. At any rate, so let's take a look at his face here. Look at those eyebrows there, right? They're down, right? And his mouth is, right? He's even got a little, a little cactus fist up. Stay out of my yard, right? So we can say, if we are looking for evidence in the pictures, we can say, we know Hank is angry because he has an angry look on his face. He has his little cactus arm like a fist, right? These are the details that you could talk about when you're looking for evidence that tells you that Hank feels angry in this case, right? You're looking for details. I included this page because when there's a story about character change, like this particular story is, there's a point where something happens that causes a change to happen. And for this book, this is that point. Now, let's read real quickly what the author says. Before Hank could yell back at the coyote, a cowboy strode past. "Keep off the grass," shouted Hank. Hank is shouting. He's still angry, right? Look at the face. He's still angry. But the cowboy says, "What grass?" said the cowboy. "Seems to me somebody needs a hug. Too bad nobody hugs a cactus," right? After that, things change for Hank. And if you can look at, Hank's face here and see that, all right? So in the next page, there's a lizard that pops by, and here's what the author writes. "Hi," said a lizard. "Who invited you?" said Hank. "And in case you're wondering, I don't want a hug." "Well, that's good," said the lizard, "because I don't want to give you one." Then he skittered away. Hank said, right? Said Hank, not yelled Hank, not shouted Hank, right? Things are changing a little bit for Hank, right? Now let's take a look at the illustration, right? So again, the illustrator uses pictures, and look at his face. It's different now, right? And I imagine this to be the face like, the lizard doesn't want to give him a hug, and he's like, "Huh, what do you mean? You don't want to give me a hug?" Hey, so a little further in the book here, we start to see some more changes in Hank. So let's really cite the evidence that lets us know that Hank is changing, all right? Take a look at the words the author used. The whole page reads, "The next morning, Hank was feeling more sad on the inside than prickly. Maybe a hug wouldn't be so bad after all." Okay. In this case, the author spelled it right out for us. We don't have to dig too deep, right? We can just say, we know Hank was sad because he felt more sad than prickly. Okay, the author used those words. The author also told us why, right? Why is he feeling sad? But the author was a little more discreet about this. Maybe the author's telling us what Hank is thinking here. Maybe a hug wouldn't be so bad after all. That translates to Hank kind of wants a hug, and he's a little sad about it, right? Okay, so let's take a look at the pictures. And, look at the face. All you got to do is look at Hank's face right there. His eyes are closed. His mouth is down. He's sad. Okay, so looking at that evidence on the page, we can say we know Hank was sad because he had a sad look on his face. All right. So it's easy to look at this page and be able to, it's probably easy to look at this page and be able to see that Hank is sad. But what we're trying to do is to look at the page and be able to pull evidence from the words and from the pictures to prove this is why Hank is sad. Okay. All right, there's some more changes in Hank's a little bit later in the story. Let's look at what the author says here on this page. Hank decided to grow the best flower he could, then give it to Rosie as a thank you gift. It took days, but at last it was ready. He couldn't wait for Rosie to pass by again. Okay, so let's take a look. the author here describes something that Hank did. He grew a flower to give to Rosie as a thank you gift. Well, when someone gives a thank you gift to someone, they may have a feeling of being grateful, all right? Grateful or thankful, right? That's a feeling that he may have. Now we could see he's happy, but there's a little more to that. There's something, a characteristic that would be a little more detailed than just saying that he's happy. He's grateful, all right? Looking at that evidence that the author provided for us, we could say Hank was grateful because he made a flower for Rosie. He couldn't wait to give it to her. All right, let's take a look at what the illustrator did. Look at the face. He's got a smile on his face. He's happy. He's right. We could even say he's eager. One thing we could say, Hank is happy because he has a smile on his face. We could also kind of say eager. We could get a little more detailed than that because he's kind of holding up the flower. He's looking down over the field, and he can't wait for Rosie to join us again. All right. Okay, and this is at the end of the book here, where Hank finally gets his hug. Okay. Rosie was so surprised, she jumped up and gave Hank a great big hug. It felt so nice. Hank didn't want to let go. And as things turned out, he couldn't. Rosie and Hank had become stuck together. Okay. So if we're going to talk about how Hank felt about this hug, right, let's take a look at what the author had to say about this. Okay. Hank, the author is describing how Hank is feeling here. And what words to use? Just that it felt so nice. Do you think you liked the hug? Hank didn't want to let go, right? Well, we could say Hank liked the hug because he thought the hug felt nice. He didn't want to let go. That could also be part of the description, right? All right. Now let's take a look at the face here, the picture that the illustrator provided for us. All right. So take a look at that face right there. I mean, he's happy. His eyes are closed. He's smiling. Right. His little cactus arms are not up in a fist anymore. Definitely not. His little cactus arms are trying to wrap around Rosie. Right. Could say that Hank liked the hug from Rosie because he had a smile on his face. We could add a little more description to that. We could talk about the fact that his arms are around Rosie. He's got a smile, right? We could also probably, from this picture, draw a couple other conclusions about Hank and his feelings for Rosie at this point, right? I think he really likes Rosie, right? Grew the flower for her, couldn't wait for her to come back, and then, gets a hug from her in the end, okay? So I'm going to try to review what the point that I'm trying to make here. We are trying to pull evidence from a book to prove or show that a character feels a certain way or has certain characteristics. Again, we look in the words, the authors use the words, and we look at those words and see it and read about what the characters do. We read about what they say. We read about what they think, and we may even read about what they look like, because some authors will describe what a character looks like. And we take those words in and we try to think about what's going on in the story and then be able to use some of those words to explain why a character is the way a character is, or why a character feels the way a character feels. All right, the author uses some pictures, and those pictures are going to describe what the characters do and what sometimes even what they think. The illustrator did a great job of showing us what Hank was feeling by drawing his face, and of course the illustrator is going to give us an idea of what the character looks like. All right. So I hope you found this little lesson useful on being able to pull evidence from books and draw some conclusions. All right. Again, I hope you find it useful. I hope you find it helpful. And I hope to see you again soon. Bye now.